I'm pretty sure. Hey, good evening, Jennifer. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Good evening.
Peter crashes. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good night, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening, all. How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Good evening, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. I can just say Happy New Year to some of the others. I already said it, but I'll say it again. Happy New Year. Hey, Rob, you with us? Rob, we can see you.
Hello, everybody.
Okay.
Happy New Year. We're going to give it a few more minutes and see if we can get the room a little fuller, and then we'll kick it off.
I have to go out and come back, Rob. Happy New Year.
You too, Ethel. See you soon.
So now my camera's working. I'm back.
Well, I'm just playing with the spreadsheet. We needed to update a few things. Some new people who've expressed interest in joining, which is wonderful. But I need to make sure I have their names. Great, we have a quorum, so we can get rolling whenever. And thank you for those of you who've reached out over the course of the last few meetings to determine or to let me know whether you want to join us as a member or whether you're just content to be a looker, participant, community activist. The community board has a rule that states that membership in a given committee is open to non-community board appointed members if they earn their way on by attendance. So three meetings of the last, 3 meetings consecutive gets you on, and you have the right to vote at the 4th meeting. So we've had meetings in September, October, and now January, and I see several people who have attended September, October, and now January. And I'll be reaching out to you afterwards to confirm, if you haven't chatted with me privately already, that you want to be a voting member in our February meeting. So that's how we work that with community members who want to join. To maintain the right to vote at a given committee meeting at a given time, we look at the trailing 6 meetings. If you have attended at least 3 of the last 6 meetings of this committee, at the 4th meeting or 7th meeting, depending on how you want to look at it, you're entitled to vote. So we always look back at the last 6, and as long as you check a present or an excused absence at 3 of those 6 meetings, you can vote. Many people have perfect attendance, which obviously means they can vote. Sometimes we have to go back to the books and see who attended and who didn't. And, I always try to err on the side of charity and give you an excuse if you think you were there or you had a good reason to miss. It's not the iron fist here. No, we're not trying to exclude anybody from the ballot box. We're not, I don't think I speak with everyone, but we're not Republicans here. So there we are.
Rob, are you 3 consecutive meetings?
3 consecutive to earn your way on, but then it's 3 out of the 6 to maintain.
Okay, just for clarity.
No problem. All right, let me just make sure I've got everybody. I'm going to just run through the roster as I think it should be, and this includes people who will, as of tonight, be voting members. So if you're here, please unmute and say yes. Mr. Albert. Mr. Atkins.
Here.
Thank you. Julia Boyd.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. John Buckholtz. Janet Collins.
Present.
Thank you. Alan Gerber. Mr. Gerber emailed and said he was having trouble getting in. I will try to get him in. Saskia Hagens.
Present.
Thank you. Eugenie Harris Blenman.
Present.
Thank you. Surzima Jordan.
Present.
Thank you. Regina Kinsey. Peter Crashes.
Here.
Thank you. Francis Langley.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fiora Ortiz Joyner.
He
Present.
was in the meeting earlier.
Thank you. Celeste
Present.
Stern. Got you, Ms. Joyner. Celeste Stern.
Here.
Thank you. Mark Thurton.
Here.
Thank you. Ethel Tyus.
Present.
Irsa Weathers. Thank you. Irsa Weatherspoon. Robert Witherwax present. And Deborah Young. Okay. I also, former member of the committee, you may remember Bobby Lapointe. He would still like to be active, but he can't join for a while. So he's staying on the committee rolls, but as an example, he has rolled off the voting roster, and he will have to reestablish himself as an active member to roll back onto the voting roster. So just as an example. I think that's it. All right, that's 14 present out of a possible 16 members. So that's a really good turnout. Thanks, everybody. I guess you were all starved to be back in the issues of environment, sanitation, and transportation. So on that note, if I didn't call your name and you are here and you would like to be this committee, reach out to me either in the chat or missed a name. Carrie Tan.
Present.
Thank you, Carrie. Sorry, I had you on the list, but I didn't sort you in somehow. So there you are. Great. If you didn't get called and you would like to be, please let me know. One of you already has. You'll probably be on for the next meeting. So thank you very much. Moving on to the business of this evening. Is anybody here to speak on behalf of the Bertha Vaughn application for co-naming of Classen and Lincoln? Taking that silence to mean nobody's here to speak on that, I move to table that item until February, at which point we will reconsider. In the meantime, I will reach out to the applicant and see if they are still interested in moving forward. To recollect the committee's attention, we move to approve consideration of the co-naming in our October meeting. The process then is that they have to give formal notice to the people on the corner that is proposed for the co-naming, residences and businesses and institutions that are on or adjacent to that corner, and then come back to us with proof of that notice, and then we'll consider it again. I don't believe we've received anything by way of that at the board office. So I will reach out again and see if we can maybe get them in here for February. The second co-naming was for Mr. William Howard on the corner of Nostrand and Dean. That circumstances have kind of taken that out of our hands. It is my understanding that the former council member Robert Cornegie, late of the 36th Councilmanic District, pushed that through in a year-end bill. So he took the co-naming out of the usual process and just pushed it through at the end, if you will, which is, it always ends in a city council vote. But I believe it kind of skipped over the community board and got approved in that forum before his term ran out, which is one of the perks of being a councilman, I guess. Moving on down the list now, the main meat for tonight is the subcommittee reports. So as you may recall, in October, we divided up into 5 different subcommittees, forgive me, 2 of which consisted of me. Six subcommittees, 2 of which were me as one subcommittee. And the expectation was over the course of November, December, January up till now, these subcommittees were to meet, discuss, and be prepared to come tonight with some form of report on what the committee considered, when the committee met, how the committee has determined it wants to move forward. So, and come forward with a deliverable that we can achieve as a committee, subcommittee, or as a committee in the whole by the end of the board year in May. Examples of deliverables would be to schedule a public forum on a particular topic, to draft a letter to our elected officials advocating for a particular stance or supporting a particular piece of legislation, drafting a letter or requesting of an agency to alter a particular policy in a particular way, or the usual way we work, making a budget request for either a capital project or an expense item that falls under the coverage of that particular committee's subcommittee's work. So on that, I will turn to the list of committees. The RATS committee was comprised of Desmond Atkins, Janet Collins, Francis Langley, Regina Kinsey, Igenie Harris-Plenman, and Zertzima Jordan. Did the committee meet at any point in time over the last 3 months?
They did. I didn't know about it.
No, we did. We did not meet.
Well, you have until, we'll postpone that. We'll table that until February, just so that the members know the date in February is going to be
Mr. Wilson,
the 22nd.
is there a way we can get together now on a time or something? We can get to do that? Because before nobody called and we didn't call anybody. I don't have any numbers. So
This, if it didn't happen by itself, I will make it happen in the next couple of weeks. So
Okay.
that's fine. We'll set a time where I will get on that committee and we'll have a time to meet and discuss. So, but again, all this by the 22nd of February.
How selfish can you be?
Next is illegal dumping. which was comprised of Mr. Atkins and Miss Langley. Did you meet to discuss illegal dumping? All right, take that as a no. We'll do the same thing. We will schedule a time for that subcommittee to meet.
Okay, excuse me,
Oh,
Mr.
Hi,
Witherwax.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, no, I had been pressing, I had been trying to unmute temporarily and it didn't recognize me, so I just unmuted. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you give the members of the Vermin Committee was myself, Janet Collins, Francis Langley.
What would you do if I didn't come?
It was Atkins, Collins, Langley, Kinsey, Harris, Blenman, and Jordan. Wish I could post this in the chat. Does everyone see the chat? Is that disabled?
I can,
No,
I can see the chat. Whoever is on the phone ending in 17, if they could mute themselves, that would be great.
If you can see the chat, I just posted the list of the members of each committee.
excellent.
So cut and paste and snap that out of there. So no problem. That's why we built a lot of wiggle room into this this board year. We even, February is not a problem. So the Sanitation Committee, Ms. Stern, Celeste Stern, Julia Boyd, Alan Gerber, Janet Collins, Carrie Tan, Regina Kinsey, Zuzima Jordan, Fiora Ortiz-Joyner, and Pierre Albert. Did that committee have a chance to meet over the last couple of months?
If they did, I didn't know about it.
I never received anything.
Okay, no problem. We probably were a little bit too autonomous on this, which is fine. We'll make it happen. Since I know for a fact that the Rules of the Road Committee met, I will skip over them for a moment, and I'll talk about it should say B71, and that's my apologies. The bus I take the most often is the B69, so I don't know. I guess I was thinking of the B69. But I was thinking of the B71, so I'm going to correct the minutes to reflect that. B71, for those who don't remember, used to run along Eastern Parkway through Grand Army Plaza and down Union Street into Carroll Gardens, loop around in Carroll Gardens, and come back. It was a great bus to get east-west in a way that the subway system just doesn't get you without really going through some crazy interchanges. It was a great way for this community to move to the other side of Flatbush Avenue down to the Kiwanis and into Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill area, and vice versa. It was taken away from us about 10 years ago, and we've been advocating passionately ever since to bring it back. So consulting with myself, I've drafted a letter which I will circulate in the coming days to the MTA requesting as part of the new monies that are being showered down upon it by the federal government and by the state government that it consider expansion of bus service to include the reasonable resemblance to the former route of the B71. As you may also recall, and this is a project that got kicked down the road from the end of the Cuomo years, the MTA and New York City Transit has been doing a borough by borough re-examination of the bus routes. That really got put on ice during COVID, even though that would have been an excellent time to reconsider and maybe even reconfigure such a thing. But now again, with the MTA being flush economically, hopefully that is something that is back on the agenda and we can participate in it. We've seen some rumblings to that effect, but nothing definitive. ADA compliance, that was another matter that was dear to this committee's heart at the end of last year, and that was advocating for improvements to our subway systems, and the entrances to the subway systems for those who are fall under the aegis of the ADA, right? Mobility impaired. We got a elevator at the Eastern Parkway Brooklyn Museum stop, which is great. And then we need to convince the MTA to look at possibly reopening some closed entrances at subway stations that are in or adjacent to our community board. 7th Avenue on the BQ, Nostrand Avenue on the AC, possibly an elevator at Nostrand or Kingston Avenue on the 3. There are possibly an elevator at Grand Army Plaza. There's lots of possibilities. An elevator at Franklin Avenue. All of these things would do well, and we need to beat the drum. So again, I have drafted a letter which asks the MTA to consider Community Board 8's locations in the next round of its capital plan. I will circulate that in the coming days. Enough of me. Moving on to the Rules of the Road Committee, which was Celeste Stern, Janet Collins, Saskia Hagens, Mark Thurton, Carrie Tan, Fior Ortiz-Joyner, and Peter Crashes. And thank you for CCing me on much of your communication. I tried deliberately not to read it too closely to let you get through your process, but I'll hand the ball over to whoever wants to report on behalf of that committee.
Take the initiative? Okay. Let me distress. She was gonna eat it.
Yeah, if I don't know if anybody else wants to take the lead on this, but I'm happy to talk about it. So we kind of went around in circles on a on a lot of topics, to be honest. Ultimately, there was the last meeting we had some discussion about, whether what exactly these deliverables should be. To be honest, I am still very unclear about what it is we were meant to be doing and what it is we ended up with. Peter produced these two spreadsheets, like issue tracking spreadsheets, I guess you would describe them, to keep track of transportation and, as you put it, public realm improvements that people requested. I'm still unclear on how that relates to the deliverables that we were asked for. So maybe Peter or Fior could chime in on that front and clarify things for everyone.
So this is Peter. Yeah, I think what we met 3 times, and we had definitely some vigorous conversations. The first meeting in particular, with a lot of discussion about equity. The focus of the community board, where improvements are made, where the agencies are directed to respond to issues. So one of the suggestions was to, in a way, find a way to codify or write down where issues are reported to the community board, and then follow through by tracking what happens to those issues. So the committee would, if somebody comes to the committee and says we have a problem at St. Mark's in Kingston, then we would mark it down, write down what the issue is, and then we would have a way to track it. We'd know how to respond to it. We write down what response we have. So that's what one sheet was for. And the second sheet is similarly for suggestions and proposals for public investment, like investing in streets, sidewalks, public plazas. So that's the second sheet. We can actually kind of develop the draft, which you can look at if you want. And then actually Carrie as well, I think, designed a means for the public to give direct input into the community board, sort of, I guess, a more nuanced transportation-focused strategy to the contact form on the Community Board 8 website. But basically, there were discussions about, we did discuss the goal of, we expect to, I think, continue meeting. We had discussions about a wide range of topics, including, as I mentioned already, equity throughout the district, east to west, preparations for the increase in density that's coming on the north side of the district, discussion about open streets, both Vanderbilt and Underhill. And I think there was interest in creating a platform for continuing to discuss those, both as well as a general discussion about open streets, but specific to, there was especially, I think, some vigorous discussion about the Underhill open streets proposal, but where, and also discussion about where any improvements to the Vanderbilt improvement, whether the community board would get for example, Food Town came to the last EST meeting. Is there going to be follow up on that? And then there was a collection of different kinds of neighborhood issues, bicycles on the sidewalks, the helicopters. Each one of those could, in theory, be entered into that quality of life spreadsheet, and then we would track them. And that's where the policy of the committee, like the committee, would determine ideally what the next step would be in some of these cases. Eventually, there'd be a kind of procedures for each of these types of issues. Similarly, like in the other sheet with the public realm improvements, speed bump requests would track down where a speed bump has been requested, and and take a look at where if there's a cluster of speed bump requests, then that might be interesting to note. We can look at the crash data and enter it into the safety sheet. Yeah, and that's, I don't know, does anyone else want to add anything? That's my input for the moment.
This is Fio Ortiz Joyner. Yes, I wanted to mention that we also spoke about in a previous meeting, but recently in last meeting, in regards to a proposal for Atlantic Avenue that is in its planning stages, how the subcommittee and the EST committee could possibly get involved in the pre-planning, and perhaps as a deliverable, we could possibly have a letter written to our elected officials regarding that plan, or we could possibly have a public forum to involve Community Board 8 more as far as the plans are for Atlantic Avenue, and I believe is adding bike lanes with the road. So that's one of the things that was discussed at the last meeting. I just wanted to point that out.
Right there, I forgot that. Thanks.
No, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Fior. I think that's wonderful. I think the work that the committee put in, just grappling with the issues over the course of 3 meetings is wonderful work enough. But to bring these template spreadsheets to us,
what I made.
I think that's you're done for the year. Congratulations. But I love the fact that you want to keep talking about these issues, and I think that's great. I think there's potential for kind of having this kind of street-focused committee that really gets to know, subcommittee that really gets to know the nitty-gritty about how we move around the city and how we track, as Peter said, the issues that arise and that we know about, and record, most importantly, the responses and the follow-up, which is when the ball usually gets dropped, is wonderful. And I think Fior's notion that this could also be a venue to plan and prepare perhaps an open, a charrette or a community meeting, or even just a discussion with DOT about Atlantic Avenue. That's another great deliverable that we can try to put together before the end of the year. That's great. I see that there is a hand up. Ms. Tyus, do you have a question or a comment?
I do have a recommendation, longstanding from the board office, that when people submit to 311 complaints or recommendations, that they take the service request number and forward that to the board office. Monthly, Ms. George meets with the various service agencies, and she takes those service request numbers for discussion with agencies that are responsible for providing the service. So if we could ask the board office to provide the committees with the minutes from the borough, borough service meetings, and track those SR numbers, I think that we could get some helpful recommendations to the surface of what needs to be done in CD8. Just on the helicopter thing, one other aspect needs to be added. That is a federal agency that would deal with the low-flying helicopters. It's not city-based, so I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
I hate to be a stickler, but it was the rules of the road subcommittee. And last time I checked, helicopters should not be on roads by and large. So I think we can maybe add that to the main agenda of the main committee. And I think your point is well taken, Ms. Tias. But yeah, there is a movement afoot, and I meant to circulate this to the committee, and it had a really neat hashtag about stopping the proliferation of casual helicopter traffic in New York City. Adrian Benepe was on it over the weekend. So we can get involved and make a statement on that.
Mr. Witherwax?
Before we move on.
Mr. Witherwax?
Hold on. I hear Mr. Atkins and Ms. Collins. Let me just finish saying one more thing about the notions for going forward. I think Ms. Tias had an excellent point, and I think what we can do, and maybe I would recommend to the committee, is that we take what the committee board office already has by way of its SR numbers and such. And I know the inquiry was made by the committee, and I don't think the response was overwhelmingly wonderful, but we can see what we have as a baseline. What are the issues? What are the reports? What are the projects that are ongoing? And then put some tracking on for it. So I think that's a great idea as a next step for the committee. So helicopters we'll pull out. We'll keep on that. And I see some comments in the chat about asking TA and other issue advocacy organizations to maybe come to a forum about Atlantic Avenue. And again, I think that's a wonderful use of this committee's time. So I think we will move forward on both of those fronts to put those together. Mr. Atkins and then Ms. Collins.
Mr. Witherwax, it's difficult for me to hear you because there's someone else on the phone talking.
Yeah. Whoever has the phone number 347 ending in 17, if you could mute, that would be fantastic. I don't have the ability to mute you from this end.
Mute by star 6.
Yeah. Mr. Atkins, then Ms. Collins.
Thank you. Regarding the issue about the helicopters, I know that the comments previously had been about low-flying helicopters. I believe about 2 months ago, a helicopter landed in Board 9. I don't remember if it was Troy or Albany.
And Carol. Troy and Carol.
Troy and Carol. And I sent the information around to people in an article, and it was stated by a member in the committee that basically people with more income tend to want to have that kind of service and tend to want to be anonymous. And I brought up the point that no matter who they were, they didn't have the right to basically create a hazard. That they landed in an open lot at that corner, and there really was no follow-up afterwards from any city officials that I saw. Secondarily, the suggestion that when there are issues that I've posted to 311 and then forwarded to the community board office, particularly because of one very bad vendor. In the past, what I've seen is they get closed down rather quickly and said, nothing to see here, keep moving. And so I'm really annoyed when that happens. And so I know typically the only way to get people to pay attention is to physically document it and then put it, shove it in their face or get a bunch of people to sign a petition. And I wasn't able to do that at that time. But in the past, with the issues that I've had regarding things, the city agencies, unless you force their hand, they don't do anything. I reported a dead tree that was 60 feet tall, and they said the tree was living, and someone else had reported it. And then a week after that, they cut it down. But if that tree had fallen, property, health, and life were in danger. That's the worst example that I can think of.
Right.
That being said, hopefully our new city councilman will have enough staff that he can force issues with different city departments, because it's not that they don't hear us; it's that they're basically juggling a million balls.
I think we event in the fall has not been forgotten, and I think we can remind people of it. And I think we have some good allies in Community Board 9. And again, as I said, Adrian Benepe, the former Parks Commissioner, now the current head of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, is a ardent advocate for stopping this kind of behavior. And the hashtag I couldn't remember is Stop the Chop. You know, when you have a good hashtag, the battle is half won. Stop the chop. We can take some steps to communicate with our electeds at the city, state, and federal level. I agree with Ms. Tice, it's a federal law, but hey, New York City has got a lot of suasion on this question. So we can work on that. And that will be something we do. We'll put together an agenda item for next meeting. Thank you about that. Ms. Collins, then Mr. Meehan.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of put the icing on the cake, I guess, about the helicopters, because I've been talking about them for quite some time. These 2 years last 2 years, and before that, when Edie Fox was chairperson of this committee, we had the same problem years ago. I think it was 2006. I actually found some of the emails back 2007. When we had to deal with these helicopters, and we were quite successful. So I would like to also add that not only do we contact the FAA, but also the Eastern Regional Helicopter Council, and wage complaints there as well. So we, like Desmond was saying, we need a lot of people behind this. A helicopter went over my head, over my street. I saw the pilot. He was so low. Now that's absurd.
Yeah.
So
it's one thing if it's police,
yeah, so,
it's one thing if it's news, but if it's just a commuter or a tourist,
well, this
we
is
don't need that.
This is the East to West Brigade.
Yeah.
So I would just like to encourage everybody, just like the science is saying, to make a log. You know, the squeaky wheel gets the most noise. Calling, let the elected officials know what's going on, because we don't want to wait for something to happen before we act. We want to be preventive in this. We don't want a helicopter crashing down on somebody's property or their head or what have you. It's the worst scenario. But
Thank you, Ms. Collins.
Being shaken out of your bed at night or early in the morning, when you can't hear when you're talking in your own house, you can't hear your music, you can't hear the TV, you can't hear the people talking, that's outrageous. So that's my piece. And,
thank you. Mr. Meehan, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yes, but it's not about the helicopter. Should I wait until later?
No, we can move on from the helicopters. I think we've said our piece on that.
Sure. So in that case, I wanted to make a comment. I had read that Councilmember Botcher of District 3 is going to be working on a containerized trash proposal, and I wanted to offer that up as something potentially for Subcommittee 3 to look into for our district as well, maybe getting Councilmember Hudson and Osei on board, to try and get some of these, trash bags off of the sidewalk.
I think Councilmember Osei actually tweeted the other day that he was in support of a containerized trash initiative. So, I think we're in good stead there. I haven't heard anything about it from Councilmember Hudson, but I agree. I think we should definitely inquire.
I think that's a great use of that committee's time, subcommittee's time. And Mr. Meehan, you're now a member of the subcommittee. So congratulations. You complain about it, you own it. No, I think that's a great bit of active legislation to look into, consider, and adopt a position on, or at least inquire what our elected officials believe about it. I see a hand from Saskia Hagens and a hand from Fior Ortiz Joyner. So Saskia?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to go back to the Rules of the Road Committee for a bit, although I am definitely in support of containerized trash. This is more of a question, but one thing that came up a number of times in our discussions was speeding, which I believe is an issue throughout the district, making the roads very dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists and everyone else alike. Though it seems that several of the things that could be done in response require action either on the state level when it comes to reducing speed limits or installing more speed cameras, and or policy change on the level of DOT regarding installing speed bumps on shorter blocks, which DOT claims they can't do. I guess my question is whether this committee has taken action on that front before. If so, what the obstacles were, if not, if you have any
You put your finger on the pulse of the problem with the community board. We are, to take a quote from, I think, St. Jerome's translation of the book of Isaiah, vox clamantis in deserto. We are the voice crying in the wilderness. Nobody has to listen to us. Our job is to yell and point and raise attention. And we have done so in the past on issues, certainly about speed bumps and where they should be. Especially that short block question. Underhill Avenue should have speed bumps. There's no question about it. It's insane that it doesn't. But that is not DOT's playbook. DOT can change its playbook, and we have quietly, loudly, publicly, and privately over the last several years pushed them to do so. And I think we've said the same things on other topics as well. Raised sidewalks. A lot of the street design, street infrastructure projects that don't fall into the current toolkit that DOT wants to use, but could be used and have been used successfully elsewhere. We have pushed again, publicly, privately, loudly, softly for a lot of that. And I'm fully supportive behind a letter that says to DOT, look, we think this would solve one of our problems. Please consider it. If that's all we end up doing, it doesn't sound like a lot in the macro, but that's our job. It's our job to stand up there and say, here's what our community needs. Even if there's not a snowball's chance in hell, we might get it. It's our job to go on record and say that. So I hope that answers your question.
Right. Yeah. So it would take the form of a letter. And who knows, maybe our current mayor and DOT commissioner are more receptive to that.
It's a magic moment. And I want to be sure that we are speaking on behalf of our community as loudly and as clearly on the issues that matter to our community as possible, because if we're quiet on these issues, people will get into their habits and their ruts, as they always do. So I want to seize the moment. Ms. Joyner, and then Mr. Crassus, and then Ms. Conan, and then Mr. Atkins.
Yes, I just wanted to mention on the trash cans, although the deadline was Sunday for the Council District 36 participatory budget, people can still go on the website and endorse other ideas. And I believe there is a rat-proof trash bin idea someone proposed for Bed-Stuy. We as people who are in Council District 36 can definitely endorse that idea and put in a comment that this would be a great idea for if you live in Crown Heights North on the other side of Atlantic, so that we can also benefit from it. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. That's worth noting. And I'd like to say that the rat traps got their start. Their first public test was right here in Prospect Heights. So these are what we may be seeing rolled out on a much larger scale across the city. Ms. Conan, Mr. Crassus, Mr. Atkins, and then back to Saskia. Shelley Conan?
Can you hear me? So, yeah, sorry.
Yes,
I didn't realize
yes.
I typed my name in wrong. It's Shelley Cohen, and I'm like, who's Conan?
You're going under an alias tonight. That's all right.
Yeah, that's why I was just a little confused. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just was wondering if you've heard anything about like bringing curbside composting, expanding it to, zones that are not included right now. Because like I've, wanted to compost, but it's hard to do that with a community garden, especially it's just convenient when people can come and pick it up from from the curb instead of like schlepping it somewhere far.
The answer to your question is that the city is, and this is an answer that's probably about a year old, the city is not rolling out any new brown bins in any districts. They're continuing to support the brown bins that they've rolled out, but they're rethinking the whole program. And so they're not, we were in line to be next a couple of years ago, and then they stopped. So until they come around again, with either the brown bins or a replacement program, we're kind of in a holding pattern. But again, magic moment. I don't know what's going on in the Department of Sanitation right now, but hopefully some kind of curbside composting is coming.
Is there any like information that you think will be released, or is there any timeline around that, or any way to like push that forward?
Happy to write a letter and see if the agency can give us a response. So perhaps that's something we will do out of the Sanitation Committee. Hint, hint.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crassus, sorry, Mr. Atkins, Mr. Crassus, and Ms. Higgins, right?
Mr. Crash has preceded me, but if he's not objecting, I'm going to go ahead.
Go for it.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to bring up a couple more information about one or two points that were made. As far as the rat-proof cans, 2 or 3 years ago, I hosted a rat academy, and there were gifts of rat-proof cans to people who attended. I have one and I use one at my house. I can tell you point blank that BK8, our general sanitation, is not very happy to take trash out those cans. They complain that they are too difficult. They treat the cans poorly, as though they would like to break them. I remember when they were steel cans, the moment you got a new steel can, they started to try and destroy it by dribbling it literally. But the cans are effective. And even so, if you have more trash than you can put out, you can put the last bag on the top of the can out of the reach of rodents. That being said, the committee that I'm part of, so I take my initial blame for not pushing it. I have basically tons of suggestions that had gone through the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene already, as far as trying to reduce the vermin population. But it once again comes down to the city's money and enforcement. That being said, moving right along, the composting issue, I happened by chance to be on the street when the communications department of sanitation was in Brooklyn, was in a not Prospect Heights, Brooklyn Heights. They were on 7th Avenue and I believe President, and they were filming it when it was first starting. And I asked them at the time, and they said, no, we're only going to be rolling this out initially in Brooklyn, in South Brooklyn. And that is what they stayed true to. And when I pressed and I asked Ms. George, they said, well, the building styles that are in our community don't lend to them using that kind of program in our community. And then they continued going, and they said they kept holding people off. And then they finally said, well, we're going to discontinue the program, but everybody who's already got it gets to keep it. And raspberries to everybody who didn't get it yet. And so more or less, if you have heard people talk about, well, maybe it's pretty much the same thing. Central Brooklyn or Brooklyn North is always gets the short end of the stick. If you don't know, the bulk of money in Kings County is in Brooklyn South. If you've been to a Chamber of Commerce dinner, that's when you'll see just exactly who most of the entrepreneurial money, where it sits at. And therefore, they have the greatest weight in the Democratic Club, which basically is, as Mr. Witherwax alluded to, it's basically a one-horse town here in Kings County, the largest county in the state by population. So all those things being considered, and the fact that we've had several people, local politicians, come up, and one or two of them asked people to be involved with county committee. If you live in the 40s, in the 43rd, you should, or you might even live in the 36th presently, you should look forward to, if you want to find a way to increase your community presence, that is supposedly one way to do it. But under the present administration, there is internal friction that is not immediately apparent to most people unless you're paying close attention. But it reverberates on everybody here and all the issues that are being talked about. So
Exactly.
I'm. Was that an amen corner from you,
Well,
Robert?
I don't disagree with anything you've said, but I think we're getting a little off topic. So I'm going to ask.
I just want to point out that's the second biblical reference that you made tonight. I think you went to Isaiah before.
It could have been Jeremiah. I'm very bad at that. But I'm not sure. I just remember the phrase. It sticks with me. I took too much Latin. What can I say?
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I don't regret a minute of it. Mr. Crashes?
Thank you. Yeah, so I just want to touch on two things. So the first, in terms of rats, I think, and Rob talked about this at the last meeting we had, that it's reasonable to expect that the new mayor is going to really focus on rats. We had the experience with the borough president in Prospect Heights when we had a rat problem, and he was definitely up in front of it. And I remember at the beginning of de Blasio's term, he proposed, he brought out a lot of mint-scented trash bags to deal with rats, and now we have with Eric Adams, the kind of new mechanism, a rat trap. But what I really wanted to go to is something that Saskia mentioned about speeding, and I think something that was discussed during the Rules of the Road meetings was in Prospect Heights we have a 20-mile-hour neighborhood zone, which was achieved, as I recall, through a application to DOT they had it at one point applications so the neighborhoods could apply for these 20-mile-per-hour zones. So to my understanding, and I'm not sure, but I'm assuming the rest of the district is 25 miles per hour. Is that correct?
Yes.
The city is, aside from arterial roads, the city is nominally a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit.
So maybe it would make sense to see if it's still alive, that program of the 20-mile-per-hour neighborhood zones, and if so, then try to identify areas in Crown Heights that might be eligible, and then also Saskia had mentioned about the short distances for some blocks not being able to have speed bumps, and I know that she comes from PHNDC, and PHNDC in the past was focused on Carlton Avenue as one of the places where that issue had arisen. So yeah, that is definitely a DOT issue, and DOT would have to change its policy about the length of the blocks. So so anyway, the 20-mile-an-hour speed zone question, and whether there might be some ability to create new areas with those zones, or even expand it across the district, would be an interesting one to look into.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure they're supporting that program at the moment. I think it's kind of the same notion of the curbside composting, right? It was a program that DOT rolled out, supported, enabled for a while, and now they're not taking new applications. That's my understanding, and we'll see what a new administration brings. They may revive it, they may reform it into a different proposal, but nobody benefits when cars go too fast, not even the driver. So I think anything we can do as a community to make it clear to our elected and appointed officials that we want tame traffic, whether that's by design or enforcement or some other mechanism, is a good one. So again, we can be as granular as we want. Going back to Carrie's comment at the get-go, which is that she wasn't quite certain whether the committee's work fit under the mission. Well, the mission was deliberately vague. And that was part of the construct, so that whatever work you produced fits the mission. If you had come with a list of letters to write, that would have fit the mission. I think your spreadsheet notion is wonderful, but I think we've got a lot of ideas here. As I'm taking the minutes, we've got at least 6 or 7 now, and I'm calling them letters, but we'll refine that at the next meeting. Issues on which we wish to speak as a committee and have a pretty good idea where we're speaking from. which is a great product of this committee and of the subcommittee's work. Saskia Hagens.
Thanks. I just wanted to quickly come back to the composting question. It's true that our district has the curbside pickup never reached our district, and even after the suspension of that during the pandemic, districts that previously had it now have a harder time getting that back. Anyway, one thing you can do is sign up for curbside composting. I'll post a link. You'll get a message from sanitation saying your neighborhood or district is currently not included, but I think if a lot of people in the district do sign up, that sends some sort of message that there's interest. If in addition, this committee could send a letter to DSNY that might hopefully bring something about.
Great. William Meehan.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, rather than trying to get a new neighborhood slow zone, I also put this in the chat, but Sammy's law is currently stuck in state assembly, and that would let the city reduce like citywide speed limits down to 20 miles an hour. So I think it might be worth drafting a letter to all the assembly members that represent our area, so that we don't have to just kind of fight on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, and the city can just, reduce the speed limits everywhere.
Great. I'll put that on the list. All right. So here's what's going to happen. The committees that haven't met are going to meet in the next couple of weeks. And if the Rules of the Road Committee would like to rest on its laurels, they are perfectly entitled to do so. But if they would like to meet again, I think that's a wonderful notion. The minutes from tonight will be prepared and circulated, and it will have some subject matter, which each of those committees can then turn around and come back to us in February with a piece of paper that either is a letter that you want to send or is an action plan for the next 3 months of the board work. And then we as a committee will vote on those action plans, those deliverables. So I appreciate everyone's time so far, and I hope we can get some meetings in the next couple of weeks so that when we convene again on the 22nd of February, we can just sort of go through all of these issues we talked about tonight. Each committee will propose an action. We will authorize that action. The committee will go back and perform that action. If it's actually write the letter and send it, great. If it's actually hold a forum about Atlantic Avenue, great. If it's build out that spreadsheet and populate it with data from the board office and 311, great. If it's meet with elected officials and talk about Sammy's law and talk about composting and talk about containerized trash and legislation that could come up before the city council or the state assembly, great. So that's where we are. I think we've done a lot of refining, which is great. Any final comments before we move on to the next bit of business? Mr. Atkins, I see your hand. But I do not hear your voice. I think you're still muted.
I had posted an article in the Google group, and I'm curious as to know if that is the acceptable way. What is the accepted use of that group as far as communication? And could that group be used for the very same committees because it's already established, and I'm going to assume that everybody has email and has access to the group.
I am not 100% sure that everybody, I have lost administrative rights to that group. I don't know who's a member of it and who isn't. So I'm going to talk to the board office and make sure that everybody who I think is a member of this committee, and I have everybody's email with a few exceptions, and I will reach out to them independently in the chat. I want to make sure that everybody who wants to be on this committee is on that Google group. To your first question, yes, that is the primary communication organ, venue, discussion for this committee as a whole. And if you want to do your subcommittee work on that, go right ahead. But give me a day or two to make sure that everybody's on it. Trying to CC people who I don't think are on it as I send out emails, but that's an imperfect system. Looking at our last minutes, We did talk about, we heard from Frank at Food Town. We heard from about helicopter traffic. We heard about the perception of increased traffic on Grand Avenue. And we heard about clogged catch basins. We followed up on some of those items, and some of those are to come. I know DOT is going to come back to us in February or March to talk about open streets, and that will address a couple of those issues. And we've reported and encouraged the members of the community to keep reporting to 311 and the CB8 office any clogged catch basins that they see. We have not heard any word back from DOT on our letter about the Eastern Parkway Safety Project. We are still hoping that they will recommence shortly if they haven't already. Mark, do you know any updates on that? I don't know if Mr. Thurton's still with us.
Sorry about the delay.
No problem.
I have not gotten any no information from DOT in reference to that. No update from them.
All right, we'll follow up with that then, and we will we'll keep on it. Any bear with me while I just send a few messages in the chat before I let people go, because I need emails. Mr. Atkins is asking, what is the city, where is the city on the placement of sheds by restaurants being policed by DOT? That's a good question. That it falls into the buckets of a new program is coming soon. So to those of you who I don't have email addresses for, I just sent you a text in the chat. Please, if you feel comfortable sending it back to me in the chat. If not, I will simply post my email address. All right. Is there any further business we want to discuss tonight? Any public comments?
Mr. Witherwax, I wanted to ask, this is Ethel Pius, I wanted to ask about the periodicity of the meetings and the
Yes.
earning membership and how those two are going to jibe.
We have 6 meetings a year, and we have room for up to, well, at this point, up to 8, because we can meet. We're not supposed to meet in March, and we're not supposed to meet in June. But if the work of the committees is such that it merits meeting, we'll meet.
Thank you.
And thank you to those members who just emailed me their emails. I think I have all the information I need. Any other further comments?
Thank you.
Atkins, what needs to be done to reconsider the frequency of meetings? Well, speak up and say, hey, you think we're meeting too much. I don't think that's the problem.
Okay, I'm going to speak up.
Go ahead.
I'm going to speak up. I think we're not meeting enough. I think I noticed that there's a lot of sentiment that meetings run too long, and some people are better at becoming efficient doing ad hoc work offline. But I find that we've lost a lot, not just in this committee. There are other committees. The one I'm a lot less throwing my body everywhere than I used to be on the community board. But I find that with the exception of land use, there's not enough discussion of the issues that take place within the community. And to his credit, Mark Thurton has taken suggestions that I offered him in the past, and he basically has tried to make it so that every committee speaks to everyone else about overlapping issues. And that's, to me, that's the only effective way to really get things done within the community. Because one issue, and the politicians thrive on that. They'll come and tell you that you're not, that you're not being focused. But focus tends to bleed over into other issues. which is why I brought up the point about DOT policing the restaurants, because that's economics, and then that's a tax base, and it's policing, and it's sanitation, and it's so many things. But everybody wants to try and make you look at things one way, and that's in one-dimensional fashion, and that really is stupid. And it's
You
making
omitted to mention a comment in the chat about police enforcement of traffic. That is well taken, right? You're absolutely right. We are not siloed in issues. We're fortunate enough as a committee that we're not, that there aren't three committees, one for environment, one for sanitation, one for transportation.
Yes,
We're
sir.
already a blend, which is great. And the fact that we have Mark as our co-chair, or vice chair here, and he's also the public safety chair, and yourself as well, Mr. Atkins, I love that overlap. We don't really have much overlap, aside from me, with the SLA committee, but we can certainly think of these things holistically, and that's where the full board and the executive committee do come in. So we need to start granular and start small, and then build up from that once we get the building blocks going. So I hear you. To your first point about meeting more frequently, I find meetings. You know how I run a meeting. If we are still at this in an hour, I think I've done my job poorly, and it's been just about an hour. I don't like long meetings. I don't think meetings should be places where we just sit around and talk to each other about whatever pops into our mind. I like focus. I like agendas. I like sticking to them. I think that's the best use and most respectful use of everyone's time. That being said, if we wanted to have more frequent, focused, productive, agenda-driven meetings, I'm open to that. But I don't want to have a formal meeting that is a brainstorming session. That's for the subcommittees.
Which is why I brought up the point about using the Google groups that you said you have no control over, and I found that the board office will censure people. They will kick people out. They will remove access, because it happened to me with something I wrote, and then it's like, oh, I tried to send something again, and it was like, you're not a member, and it's like, oh, really?
Yeah,
okay,
I think
so,
we can have this discussion offline about where the line should be drawn up. The
When will
community
you-
board
okay.
office is a city agency, and if it's supporting communications that are improper, I'm not saying you did that, but I can see the difficulties. However, I don't agree with them. So we can have that discussion later about the proper form. But feel free, everyone, to post relevant material and opine on questions of the day on that Google group. And if there's a better way to do it, we'll get that rolling. But so far, so good. All right. Any further comments?
I want to thank you, Mr. Witherwax. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tyus. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting with business being completed.
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan, Mr. Atkins, Ms. Joyner. Everyone have a good night, and look for me to email you probably by the end of the week with the minutes of this evening. Thank you all very much for a productive meeting.
Excuse me, Rob, did you see my private message?
Yeah, I will email you privately.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
And you put a lot of police officer, construction worker. Yeah, I have careers that I've been, but I just got about 6.5 years. Small lot. Said, now I'm construction sales, so so I mean, we're still Jenny or Trust, also a student at Oak State University. Also, the burgers online and with the next algebra. It's called weekends. They call it weekends. State. All the spring texture. Apparently where I'm staying was one of the most expensive hotels. And I was dating someone while I was out there. And I fit into the bedroom to, set my hair. And I go up to the mirror and I kind of turn to the side and grab something. And I feel something kind of like on me. And I felt it. So I went to reach back and there was nothing. He was just in the bedroom and he said, time, so that really freaks me out. It's useful. They want to weekends. So girls wait a little. It's $5,000. It's category thing. This is cheesy. Cheese will eat anything. You guys like cheese? That's so much fancy. This hat. The cheese head John dedicated fans. Which football team. This is all to its legit. It's a different witch. Subject answer. So it's going to be the grid. Cheese and used to do it as a kid. Cheese stands well. Just wait for time. Say the cheese stands. Cheese stands all. Cheese stands all. Cheese stands all. $250. $750 involved in the jar. The cheese is string cheese, a cheddar. Go. See, what's that out? So, next question is for another. Slogan. Get your own box. Get your own box. Well, it's cheese. Yeah, it's the thing. See which Can you save water since your dishwasher? You got it. We do it every night. So for Cascade Platinum certified dishwasher uses less than 4 ounces of recyclable. It uses that every 2 minutes. So you would Cascade easy for soft and save water. Nature's Way believes in you now. This event, one that's inspired us for over 50 years. It's by the premium savings. Made for premium alcohols for the quality of you support. Your wellness is personal. Make your way. Nature's Way savings. Step up. Step 2. Make your pick. And step 3. Showtime. Sports. It's no painful. You have to toss last. Switch to Spectrum. Enjoy the flexible internet. Spectrum. Top security. You save on speed that you want. That's fast. Spectrum. 49.99. Call 815. Start slow speed. Yes, I was in the it's a decent account. Good for you. So necessarily witchcraft, but it is technically related, and it is a religion, Wiccan is a recognized religion. Let's go. They don't really have things, but I was actually, I met my mentor when I was about 17, 18. I did everything on my own, solitary. And you went to school. So you finished? Yeah, I got my bachelor's from state also. Yeah, you get my bachelor's. You finished school, what did you get? My diploma. So you're considered what? Diploma professional? I'm considered a here. What Captain Marvel actor shares her first name? The soft French cheese. What's a French cheese? What's the soft cheese that melts? Brie. Brie. You got it. Son Smith is it? Brie. Brie. What is her name? Screaming. And I can't. Just quick, give me in. Stanford. Where he stands, guys. Oh my God. the lamb chop master. Yes, sir. The way lamb. Lamb chop master. Just go. The master. Speed for time. Yes, sir. You have to have sir, it's okay. Two things. So that seats is locked and just right. But I was yeah. Back in the 2 days. It's also about you know, there's a lot of seeds that I use, and I'm just telling you when it comes out, it's amazing. Oh, it's great. Sorry. To buy what comes it's $5,000. It's like today's category. Like, so I was eating salad, especially about stars or less. It's $60. What about 10 instead of game shows? And the series that was filmed in his garage. It's quite is it see about how to yes, that is. Still, sex has been a lot of one left-handed singer. It looks like Jay. You know, someone me. Yeah. You know, stay around after the break.
To be a thriver with metastatic breast cancer means asking for what you want.